Just a quick note, if you are male, not this Saturday, but the next one, we have a men's breakfast, and you can get an admission. But you can get in without one of these, but it's a reminder card, and it's going to be at 9 o'clock. 9 o'clock? That's a late breakfast. 9 o'clock in the morning. So, man, by 9 o'clock, you ought to be plenty hungry. And it's always great when we see dads show up with their sons. So even though it's a men's breakfast, you can bring your sons. That's always a really cool thing. So I want to remind you of that. So tonight we're in Numbers. Really interesting we'll try to get through chapter 18. I don't know if we will, but we'll start in chapter 17. Numbers 17. 17. Mm-hmm. So the Lord spoke to Moses, saying, "Speak to the people of Israel and get from them staffs." Now, what is a staff? There are a couple of possibilities here. How many of y'all have a family crest? Okay, a few of you. I don't. I have no idea. But in the ancient Near East, rather than a family crest, you typically had the family staff. And so that staff belonged to the oldest living male member of the family, who then represented kind of all the rest of the family. And so some think that's the staff that's being talked about here. Others believe that really it just means get a stick. And I would lean towards the second one because of what they do. Because they'll carve people's names on them, and you don't want to take somebody's family heirloom staff that represents the family and go carving on it. That normally is not well accepted. And so they probably just have them pick a staff, one for each father's house, from all their chiefs, according to their father's houses, and the chief is the oldest one. 12 staffs, so one for each of the tribes of Israel, and probably one for Joseph rather than Ephraim and Manasseh. Right, each man's name on his staff. Now that's very important for something for what happens, and I'll show you why I think it's important. So verse 3, write Aaron's name on the staff of Levi. Now this is not correct, because if it's the oldest male, Aaron, younger son. So it should be Moses. Moses, not me. I want you to put Aaron, and there's a reason for Aaron. So we get Aaron's name, write his Aaron's name on the staff of Levi. For there will be one staff for the head of each father's house. Then you'll deposit them in the tent of meeting before the testimony where I meet with you. So this raises some questions. So we'll look at a couple things here. This is the arrangement of the camp. So we have the 12 tribes that are around. They have the Levites. So probably Ephraim and Manasseh, the two on this little thing done. I should have brought my other laser pointer. Ephraim and Manasseh, the two on the left, are the sons of Joseph. They each get an inheritance, but probably at this point only Joseph's tribe staff is used, so because Levites are going to be one of them to get 12. And probably where they met was on the right side, right outside. Now, the tent of meeting is a very, very difficult statement, because before the tabernacle was built, there was a tent outside the camp called the tent of meeting. And Moses would go out to the tent of meeting. God would descend in the pillar of cloud. And the Bible says he spoke to Moses as a man speaks to a man face to face. And remember, for a while, Moses would even need to wear a veil over his face because the glory shone so much from him. After the tabernacle is built, there are still references to the tent of meeting. So some people think that this tent of meeting remained outside the camp in addition to the tabernacle. Others believe that the tabernacle, because this is now the place where God would meet with his people, is now also called the tent of meeting. That's the view that I take. And so it's just another way of describing the tabernacle, but it sometimes does create a little bit of confusion. Particularly when it says deposit them in the tent of meeting. Does it mean the whole thing, like in the outer court? Does it mean inside the tabernacle part, like in the holy place? And not exactly 100% clear exactly. I would lean towards somewhere in the outer court. But he said, I want you to take them and put all there where I meet with you. And the staff of the man whom I choose will sprout. Now, you know that if you have a stick and it's not in the ground, and it's not in the water, it's not going to produce leaves, it's not going to sprout. And so basically what God says, I'm going to give you a miraculous sign of who I want to be the high priest. Thus, I will make to cease from me the grumbling of the people Israel. The term make to cease is actually the same one that's used for the God making the water go away after the flood. So in Genesis chapter 8, verse 1, God said the water is going to recede. And so the grumbling is going to recede and abate, I think is how some translations have it. So it says, I'm going to make cease from me the grumblings. When they see this, they'll quit grumbling. And this goes back to chapter 16, where we have the rebellion of Korah and all the grumblings. If you want to describe Israel's time, let's see, from the call of Abraham until Jesus, grumble is probably about as good a word as you could come up with. This is not a problem they have with one generation. And the reality is oftentimes we grumble about stuff that we really shouldn't grumble about. I had discussion this afternoon with my cousin about this. Usually my brain doesn't work. I usually about 3:30 or 4. I need to take a little break before we have dinner, and so sometimes I'll read. And this afternoon I hopped on to play a couple rounds online gaming with my cousin, and I said, it's interesting. We complain about people that cheat. We complain when we make mistakes, but really it's just a game. When you think about what's going on around the rest of the world, we really grumble about stuff that's not important. And so we just kind of were talking about that, but they grumble about pretty much everything. So he said, I'm gonna make all that end. The grumblings which they grumble. Now, this is very interesting to me. Which they grumble against you. God doesn't say they grumble against me. I would expect him to say, I will put an end to their grumblings which they grumble against me. But he doesn't. He says against you. And so it's kind of nice for God to say, look, I know they're complaining about you, but I've got your back and your front and both sides. So because they're grumbling against you, but I'm going to put an end to that. So Moses spoke to the people of Israel, and all their chiefs gave him staffs, one for each chief, according to their father's houses, 12 staffs. The staff of Aaron was among their staffs, and Moses deposited the staffs before the Lord in the tent of the testimony. That's all pretty obvious. But on the next day, Moses went into the tent of the testimony, and behold, the staff of Aaron for the house of Levi had sprouted and put forth buds and produced blossoms, and it had ripe almonds. So God says, look, if I'm going to do it, I'm going to do it beyond anything that you could expect. He said, we're not just going to have leaves, we're going to have blossoms, and we're going to have almonds, which is great, because almonds are my favorite nut. Then Moses brought out all the staffs from before the Lord to all the people of Israel. Now this is extremely important. And they looked, and each man took his staff. The Lord said to Moses, put back the staff of Aaron before the testimony to be kept as a sign for the rebels, that you make an end of their grumblings against me lest they die. Now here's why this is so important. Aaron is Moses' brother. Many people probably think Moses is trying to get his brother installed as high priest. If Moses says, he comes out with one staff and says, this was Aaron's staff, there'd be plenty of room for people to, are you sure? Are you So beforehand, and everybody writes it in their own handwriting. Each man writes his name and his staff. Moses didn't write them all. So you can look and go, yeah, that's my handwriting. This is my staff. That was the one back there. And they look at, that's Aaron's handwriting. And so the fact that everybody had to write their own staff, and the fact that they were all put in there and then they're all brought out, shows that this is not Moses trying to pull one over on everyone. It's clear that Aaron is the one that God has chosen. God did it. So the fact that they write their names and that Aaron brings it out, or that Moses brings it out and has Aaron's name on it, is very, very, very important for the credibility of Aaron being the high priest. And sometimes you read the Bible, you just kind of read through this and you forget, Moses is just a dude like us. Matter of fact, kind of off subject, if you ever wonder, why in the movies all the people that represent God, none of them sound like me? They're this like deep, booming kind of, radio voice. I mean, do you think Moses really sounded like Charlton Heston? I mean, do you really, Moses said, I can't speak. Some people think he stuttered or had something else, some kind of speech impediment or whatever. Or maybe he just was scared to speak in public, which is, the number one fear of most people. But I was just kind of wondering, was Moses maybe just a short dude with a high squeaky voice? Now, when you think about it, that kind of even makes it more impressive that God would use him. Rather than, radio voice. Whoa, kind of like everybody's like in awe of this guy, and it's like they're not really. So Moses is just a regular guy, and they face regular people issues, and so sometimes I think we imbue people in the Bible with more than they were. They're just people like us, and you could, they're like, and Moses. So God does all this so that they don't grumble against Moses, and it verifies the integrity of Moses by the fact that everybody writes their name, they're all put in, they're all brought out. We see that only one of them budded. And God, it isn't like, I think I see a leaf on that, right? Yeah, you see it right there? Do you see that leaf right there? Well, I don't know if that's a leaf. So this whole thing is like turned green. There are blossoms. God leaves no doubt that Aaron is the one that he has chosen. So what does it mean then in verse 10 that Moses is supposed to take the stick back and put it before the testimony to be kept as a sign for the rebels? So there's a lot here. So the testimony is let's see what got him here. Yeah, so here's the tabernacle, and inside I got a shot here. Yeah, so inside the Holy of Holies is the Ark of the Covenant. And at this point, we know from Exodus 16 that not 16, Exodus 36. Anyway, that the 10 Commandments are in there. So now we're going to add Aaron's rod that budded inside the Ark of the Covenant. And so if you look at Hebrews, because this is a good verse to know, because it helps us. Hebrews chapter 9. Oops. Bible drill. My Bible's not turning well because the air conditioner is blowing it, and I'm not complaining. So in Hebrews chapter 9, verse 4, having the golden altar of incense and the Ark of the Covenant covered on all sides with gold, in which was a golden urn holding the manna, Aaron's staff that budded, and the tablets of the covenant. Okay. So in the ark we have a pot of manna, Aaron's rod that buds, and the 10 Commandments. So if you like alliteration, which I don't, that's why I don't do it very often. On Sundays I don't have all the things start, but you remember this one, because we have God's provision, God's priest, and God's principles. Whatever. And so here's where we find the rod that goes in there. Now on another note, yes. You're going to have to speak louder. Yes.
There were 12 tribes.
Correct.
12 staffs.
Yes.
Levites were the 13th.
Levites were one of the original 12 sons. So what happens is Joseph doesn't get an inheritance. Each of his sons is counted as a full tribe. So Manasseh and Ephraim are not sons of Jacob. They're his grandsons. They're Joseph's sons. That's how we end up with 13. For this, probably Ephraim and Manasseh are combined together as one tribe. Levi that's how we get 12 staffs. The Bible didn't say that, but that seems to be the only logical way to get 12 is to put them back together with the staff of Joseph. Together. So if you go and you buy the thing you hang on the wall of the 10 Commandments, how many tablets are there? 2. And how many commands on the first one? 5, and then 5 on the second. And there's some question about how the 5th command, honor your father and mother, belongs with all the God commands and not with the relate to other people commands. But anyway, So the idea is Moses comes down from the Mount Sinai with 2 tablets, 5 and 5. Originally he had 3, but he dropped one. So he comes down with these 2 tablets, and we've seen the picture again. And that is kind of historically the idea, but probably that's not the way it worked. Probably we have more than just 2, but on the tablets, all 10 of the commands are found. Because if you enter into a contract with someone, how many copies of the contract are you going to produce? At least 2. I don't care whether you have a copy, but I'm getting a copy. If we have a contract, you're probably getting a copy as well. So like for our mortgage, the bank has a copy and we've got a copy, and stuff like that. So you each have one. Probably the idea is that there are probably several tablets with it on it that are put in the ark, and several tablets to be dispersed, maybe as many as 12, one for each tribe. Meaning God gets a set and the people get a set, because God is in covenant with his people. And the 10 commandments begin, I am the Lord your God who brought you up out of the land of Egypt. You'll have no other gods before me. It isn't just an obligation, so to speak, on Israel's behalf, but God has obligated himself to Israel. He has obligated himself that Abraham's descendants will be like the sands of the sea and the stars of the heavens. God has obligated himself that through Abraham's line is going to come the Messiah. And then later he's going to obligate himself to the family of David. Maybe obligate himself is not the right terminology, but you understand what I mean. That God, when he enters into covenant, has committed himself to us just as we are to commit ourselves to him. And so that's why later in the prophets, particularly Hosea, and to some extent Jeremiah and a few others, but certainly in Hosea, the relationship between God and the people is pictured as a husband and a wife. And the problem in Israel's history is God has been faithful and Israel has not. And then that image is picked up in the New Testament, where Christ is the husband and the church is the bride. And so so all of that's in the Ark of the Covenant, the manna, the rod, and 10 Commandments. And he says, I want to do this as a sign for the rebels. The word for rebels is used 44 times in the Old Testament. 41 of those are rebels against God. So with only 3 exceptions, this word means to rebel against God. And so he says, though they didn't rebel against you, they rebelled against me. They're rebels. So this will be a sign to remind them that I have picked Aaron as the high priest. This isn't Moses doing what he wants to do. This is what I want to do, and picked him. And then we get it again. It's like the 3rd time he said it, that you may make an end of their grumblings against me, lest they die. Now, if God said, Paul, you can grumble and die, or you cannot grumble and live, I don't think I'd need a stick to remind me of that. But they seem to really struggle with it. I think sometimes they just didn't really believe God would do it. And they almost were in shock when he did. So thus did Moses, as the Lord commanded him, so he did. The people of Israel said to Moses, behold, we perish. We are undone. We are all undone. Everyone who comes near to the tabernacle of the Lord shall die, or we all to perish. So they've already seen Korah when the earth opened up and swallowed those rebels. So they said, man, we don't want to get close to the tabernacle at all. And that was the idea. The idea in the Bible is that you cannot have access to God. You need someone to facilitate that access. In the Old Testament, the priests facilitated access to God. That's why Paul tells Timothy that there is one mediator between God and men, the man Jesus Christ. You and I still need a priest to mediate, to grant us access to God. The thing is, our priest is not a descendant of Aaron. Our priest is Jesus Christ, who is of the order of Melchizedek, if you've read Psalm 110, and of course Hebrews, where that's quoted numerous times. And so Jesus now does the same thing the priest did, grants us access to God. That is why the veil of the temple was torn when Jesus died. But you and I still do not just have random access to God. We have access through Jesus, who is our high priest. And so, like, man, we get there, we're going to die. So that sets the stage then for what we find beginning in chapter 18, which are many of the duties of the priests and Levites. And I don't know if we'll get through this whole chapter or not, but we'll maybe get through some of it. So the Lord said to Aaron, now that might want to cause you to put the brakes on right there, because over and over and over again, the Lord said to Moses, saying, but here it says to Aaron. In verse 8, the Lord spoke to Aaron. And then in verse 25, we get back to the Lord spoke to Moses. Now, just so you'll know, for those of you who love Bible trivia, 2 Chronicles 26, 16 and following is going to be a story about this. And we're going to look at that in a minute. But Leviticus chapter 10, verse 8. So if you like, Leviticus 10:8 is the only other place that God spoke to Aaron. So here in Leviticus chapter 10, verse 8, everywhere else God speaks to Moses. So let's see what they're instructed, and then we'll look at that 2 Chronicles passage if you're trying to find 2 Chronicles 26, and we'll look at it in a second, where this actually happens. So the Lord said to Aaron, you and your sons and your father's house with you will bear iniquity connected to the sanctuary, and you and your sons with you will bear iniquity connected with your priesthood. So here's what he's saying. If you don't do it right, you don't treat it right, the iniquity's on your head. Hey, no pressure there. I mean, the people just said, if we get near, we're going to die, so you get near in our place. And basically what God says, if you get near the wrong way, you're going to die. And so you're supposed to treat it with respect, dignity, and holiness. And with you, bring your brothers also, the tribe of Levi, the tribe of your father, that they may join you and minister to you while you and your sons with you are before the tent of the testimony. So Aaron's descendants are going to work inside the tabernacle tent, but we have others that are apart, other Levites. All right, trivia. How many sons of Levi were there? 3, yes. And anybody remember any of their names? And Kohath. And so we have the 3, and Aaron comes, and each one of the Levites, remember, they each have a particular responsibility. Take down all the coverings, take out all the sons of Kohath, the ones that took care of all the Ark of the Covenant and the menorah and all that. And then they take down all the frames. And so he says, all of them are going to be working with you. So God has not rejected the whole tribe of Levi. He's just said one family of the Levites are going to be the ones that serve in the tabernacle, but the rest of them are going to have responsibilities as well. And here's more Bible trivia for you. God's going to spread the Levites around the land in what are called Levitical cities. Does anybody remember how many there were? There are 12 tribes, that's right, but how many Levitical cities? All right, so how good you are with math. There were 4 per tribe. 48, there we go, yes. And of those 48, 6 were designated as cities of refuge. Does anybody remember the cities of refuge? All right, I'll help you. Kill or stay here. Did you say kill or stay here? Have you had that class? No, yeah, no, you'll get it in my notes. Kill or stay here and bad guys run. So kill or stay here, Kadesh, Shechem, and Hebron were all the 3 cities on the west side. So it's kill or stay here because that's where you would go if you accidentally killed somebody until you had your trial. And then bad guys run. Bezer, Golan, and Ramoth Gilead on the east side of the Jordan River. Those are the 6 cities, and those are all Levitical cities. And the Levites would protect you until you actually had a trial. And if you were one of my students in seminary, you'd have to memorize all of those. Well, you don't have to. If you want to successfully pass that portion of the exam, you would need to know the 6 cities of refuge. And so they'll be all spread out, but the tribes of the sons of Aaron are going to continue to work in the tabernacle and then eventually in the temple. But that's not just their only thing to help you, but look at verse 3. They will keep guard over you and over the whole tent, but shall not come near the vessels of the sanctuary or to the altar, lest they and you die. So they have their responsibilities, you have yours, and you do yours, and they do theirs, and they are not to come and to try to do the sacrifice and things for you, or they're going to die, and you will too for allowing them to do it. They will join you and keep guard over the tent of meeting for all the service of the tent, and no outsider shall come near you. So only the descendants of Aaron are going to be allowed to go into the holy place to do this. And you will keep guard over the sanctuary and over the altar, that there may never again be wrath on the people of Israel. Because if anybody else goes in, they're going to experience the wrath of God. And behold, you know what, let's stop there and I want to look at 2 Corinthians and I'll come back and talk about what he says, because it's kind of cool what he says. So look at 2 Chronicles chapter 26, verse 16, if you haven't turned there already. So Uzziah is the king. Uzziah was one of the few kings that was a righteous king who did, for the most part, what God wanted. We have about 4 or 5 kings, depending on how you want to count them, who actually are good, but like the Bible said, he mostly followed the Lord, but there were a few things about him that didn't quite measure up. There's only one king that is just extolled as the greatest in all of Israel's history, and that is Josiah. Some people, it ought to be David, but man, I know about the whole Bathsheba thing and the Uriah thing, and then you know what Joab did, what he did with his son Absalom, and he's thinking, you know, maybe David. I mean, he was great, but he had some negative. You know, Josiah gets nothing negative said about him at all, and so it's one of the reasons we named one of our boys Josiah. So, verse 16 of 2 Chronicles 26, Uzziah, who's been a pretty good king, when he was strong, he grew proud to his destruction. For he was unfaithful to the Lord his God, and entered the temple of the Lord to burn incense on the altar of incense. So that'd be actually I think I've got one here. Yep, so he goes in to burn on the altar of incense. And Uzziah is actually the tribe of Judah because he's a descendant of David. So he's not even a Levite. And so he goes in to offer incense. Not a sacrifice of an animal, but to go in and offer incense. But Azariah the priest went in after him with 80 priests of the Lord who were men of valor. And they withstood King Uzziah and said to him, "It is not for you, Uzziah, to burn incense to the Lord, but for the priests, the sons of Aaron, who are consecrated to burn incense. Go out of the sanctuary, for you have done wrong, and it will bring you no honor from the Lord God." Now, a couple things that really jump out here. First of all, this is the king. That's probably why he has 80 men of valor with him, because they're withstanding the king. But even though he is the king, he does not have the right to violate God's rules and God's principles. I don't care who you are, it does not give you the right to violate what God has said. I don't care what your position is, your power is, your fame, or how many letters you got after your name or before your name, or what people think of you. God's rules are God's rules, period. And God doesn't make exceptions to them. The second thing is they make it clear to him, because what do they say to him? They say to him, "It is not for you, Uzziah." They don't say it's not for you, O king. It's not for you, King Uzziah. They say it's not for you, Uzziah. Because when you're in here, you're not king. You're just a guy who is disobeying God. And so they confront him. And then in verse 19, then Uzziah was angry. Now he had a censer in his hand to burn incense. And when he became angry with the priest, leprosy broke out on his forehead in the presence of the priest in the house of the Lord by the altar of incense. Now the word leprosy in the Old Testament pretty much covers any kind of skin disease. Whatever this is, it's not good. And it just, I don't know what it means, pops out on his forehead. But I'm thinking it had to be like gross. And it's obvious, whatever it is on his forehead. And Azariah, the chief priest, and all the priests looked at him, and behold, he was leprous in his forehead. And they rushed him out quickly, and he himself hurried to go out, because the Lord had struck him. And King Uzziah was a leper to the day of his death, and being a leper lived in a separate house, for he was excluded from the house of the Lord. And Jotham his son was over the king's household, governing the people of the land. So there's a co-regency. Uzziah is still considered king, but Jotham is the one who serves. And if you add up all the years of the reigns of the kings in the Bible, there are way too many of them to fit in history. But when you start getting them like co-regencies overlap, and I can give you about a 50-page article if you want to read a dude who worked through all the details. And when you're done, you'll go, "I have no idea what he said." It's ascension-year chronologies and other stuff with it. But Uzziah, by the way, when Uzziah dies, he's been on the throne for over 50 years. Now what do you do when there's been a stable presence as the king for 50 years? Well, you go pray. So Isaiah chapter 6 begins how? In the year that King Uzziah died, I saw the Lord high and lifted up. His train filled the temple, which probably means it became the floor. And the pillars of the door shook at the voice of him that cried out. And we have the seraphim that fly all around. By the way, anybody know what a seraphim is? The Hebrew word saraph means to burn. So seraphim are burning ones. So they're flaming creatures. And we know from archaeology that they were serpentine. So they are snake-like flaming creatures, or what we would call a dragon. So a seraphim is a dragon. So I have dragon backgrounds on my computer, and people say, man, you all like dragons? No, I'm not a fan of dragons, but I think seraphim are really cool. And they're just kind of like, so Uzziah experiences what the priests were commanded back in Numbers chapter 18. You will not let someone who is not a descendant of Aaron to come in and to serve, even if that person is the king. And I'm going to give credit where credit is due. The priest got it right in 2 Chronicles. Now, most time, nobody in Israel gets it right. But they get it right and tell him, not even the king is allowed to go in there. So it's not supposed to happen. And then, I like back in Numbers chapter 18, when he says in verse 6, and behold, I have taken your brothers, the Levites from among the people of Israel. They are a gift to you, given to the Lord, to do the service of the tent of meeting. And you and your sons with you shall guard your priesthood for all that concerns the altar and that is within the veil, and you shall serve. I give your priesthood as a gift, and any outsider who comes near shall be put to death. Now, I like these verses. Because if you're reading through this, you might be thinking, I don't want to be a priest. I don't want this kind of responsibility. I don't want this kind of pressure in my life. But God says it's a gift to have the opportunity to serve him. It's a gift to be chosen out from your brethren and put in this position. So God says it twice. It is a gift that I have given you. And so sometimes responsibility is a gift. Or to put it this way, sometimes stress is a gift. Now, we may not think of it that way, but the opportunity to serve the Lord is a gift from God. He says to Aaron, I give this to you. So then he's going to repeat it in verse 8. The Lord spoke to Aaron. So it's the second command. Behold, I've given you charge of the contributions made to me, all the consecrated things of the people of Israel. I've given them to you as a portion, and to your sons as a perpetual due. Now, here is why this is important. When they get into at this point, everybody eats the same thing, right? We have manna, which means what is it? They don't know. It looked like popcorn. I don't know if it tasted like popcorn, but it looked like popcorn. But when they get into the land, about somewhere between 95-98% of the people are going to be subsistence farmers. Basically, it's farming for their family to provide for them. So they're going, the Levites, where are their fields? Where are they going to grow their food? How are the Levites going to eat? So this is God providing for the Levites. So that's why he's talking about these contributions. And so he says in verse 9, this will be yours of the most holy things, reserved from the fire. So I'm not going to take time tonight to work through all of Leviticus, but the first 5 chapters, the 5 primary sacrifices, and then we get 2 more in 6 and 7. But some of the sacrifices, you burn the whole thing. Matter of fact, when you burn the whole thing, it's called a whole burnt offering. It means you burn the whole thing. And the Hebrew word is the word olah, which means to go up, because the whole thing goes up. And so if you work that down through Yiddish and a couple other languages, you get holocaust. Holocaust means burnt offering. Shoah is the word that Jews use for it, but it's the Holocaust that means a whole burnt offering, because they were burned up in the crematorium. And so he says, if it's those, you don't get any of those. But those that only part of it was burned, or none of it was burned, you get to eat from that. Every offering of theirs, every grain offering of theirs, and every sin offering of theirs, and every guilt offering of theirs, which they rendered to me, shall be most holy to you and to your sons. And most holy, by the way, in Hebrew is Holy of Holies. And the reason is because in Hebrew, there is no word for most. So to say most or best, you would say something of something. So if you want to say the highest Lord, you say Lord of Lords. If you want to say the kingest, you say King of Kings. And if you want to say the holiest, you say Holy of Holies. Okay? So guys, if you really want to wow your wife, you say, you know, you are wife of wives. That means you're the greatest wife ever. Or pastor of pastors. Nobody calls me that. Actually, there is one guy. But anyway, and so it means the holiest or the most holy to me and your sons. So verse 10, in a most holy place. Literally, it is in the Holy of Holies. In the most holy place, you'll eat it. Now, this has raised a lot of questions because, according to Leviticus 16, who gets to go into the Holy of Holies? High priest. And how often? Once a year on Yom Kippur, Day of Atonement. So how could they be told to go have a picnic in the Holy of Holies where only the high priest is supposed to go only one day out of the year? So there have been all kinds of potential suggestions. Some people think Holy of Holies is not a place here, but is an attitude. You're to eat it with the holiest attitude possible. Other people think it's just a reference to somewhere in the tabernacle area is where you are supposed to eat it. That's actually the idea that I have, and I'll show you in a minute why I think it. Well, it's the very next phrase. Every male shall eat it. It is holy to you. Now, wait a minute. So that means all the wives are going to starve to death because only the men get to eat from what is brought. So if you're working in the tabernacle area or later in the temple, then there are certain offerings you can eat from, but you have to eat them right there on the tabernacle grounds. And since only the men served as priests, only the men could eat them. Okay? Now, it's important to understand that because of what's going to happen next, because then the obvious next question is, what about the women? What about the wives and the kids? Are they going to eat? Like, can dad bring any leftovers home? Okay? Well, verse 11, this also is yours, the contribution of their gifts, all the wave offerings of the people of Israel. I have given them to you and to your sons and daughters with you as a perpetual due. Everyone who is clean in your house may eat it. So you get to take these home. So some of them, and probably the reason is some of the sacrifices, God doesn't want any of it taken outside the precincts. That's why only the priests are allowed to eat them. But others, God said, yeah, I'll take it home, it's fine. And so this is why after we have like events at our church, we send all the extra food home because we want to be biblical. The other reason is, actually we do want to be biblical. If we save it, it eventually gets thrown away. We tell people, if you have an event, don't leave anything in the refrigerator. It sits there for months. Nobody knows whose it is, so nobody wants to use it because they don't know if somebody's needing it, and then eventually it gets thrown away. So in between youth pastors, one time I served as the interim youth pastor, and we had some event, and I told her, I said, look, I'm going to send it home. If it doesn't go home, it goes in the trash. And I knew they didn't believe me, so I picked up an unopened 2-liter, held over the trash can, said at the count of 3, I'm done. 1, 2, 3, and I dropped it. I picked up the next one. Everything went home after that. They're like, this guy's crazy. But if not, it just sits there and eventually gets thrown away. Better to send it home and it be used. So we try to send it all home, unless it's frozen ice cream sandwiches that are left over from VBS, which we give out for Wednesday night dinners a couple of times, and I think we still have enough to do it again. So any of you that want another ice cream sandwich before you leave tonight, you're welcome to raid the freezer. Take 2 or 3 or a whole box. Because what happens is we're in the office during the week and we know they're there. That's just all I'll say about that. So you get to take that. And then verse 12, all the best of the oil and all the best of the wine and of the grain, the first fruits of what they give to the Lord, I give to you. So apparently all that can be taken home. The right first fruits of all that is in their land which they bring to the Lord will be yours. Everyone who is clean in your house may eat it. Every devoted thing in Israel shall be yours. Now we need to stop here and talk about this because this is it's a very interesting term. It's the Hebrew word cherem. I discussed with my wife for a while getting a personalized license plate. And I said, I want to have the word cherem put on there, devoted to the Lord. It also means to totally exterminate. And I'll explain that in a minute. But we were just afraid people would look at the license plate and go, why does he have harem on his license plate? Especially if they see me turn into the church. Or they pull in the church parking lot, and there's a car with the word harem, it looks like, and you can't put it in Hebrew, it's got to be in English, and they're like, so we decided not to. And Chicken Man won't fit on the license plate, so I have checked into doing that, like CH. I had to figure it out, CHKNMN, I put Chicken Man. But anyway, so what is a devoted thing to the Lord? This word is used mostly in the book of Joshua. And when they go into the land, the things of the land are devoted to destructions, the way most translations have it. So how can it be devoted to the Lord and devoted to destruction? The reason is because in the Bible, especially in the Old Testament, the Hebrew mindset is there's no middle ground. Jesus talks this way all the time. If you're not for me, you're against me. If you're not against me, you're for me. Like there's no like sort of against or sort of for. It's like kind of it's one or the other. No man can serve two masters. Why not six? Like, kind of stages or grades along the scale, something like that. Like it's one or the other. You're going to love the one, you're going to hate the other. That's just it. There's time to live and time to die. That, Ecclesiastes 3, all that kind of stuff. And so the idea is in the Bible, you either belong to God or you're opposed to God. And everything opposed to God, the New Testament term usually used is world. So the idea is if it belongs to God, it's totally devoted to God. And if it's to the world, it's devoted to destruction. So the word, this basically means completely devoted. And if you're devoted to one, you're an enemy of the other. That's it. And so every devoted thing in Israel, everything that is clearly dedicated to God, the tabernacle and all these offerings and everything, will be yours. That's a high responsibility. Everything that opens the womb of all flesh, whether man or beast, which they offer to the Lord, will be yours. Whoa, time out. You mean I get to take your firstborn cow and your firstborn kid? Well, that'd make Levi certainly the largest tribe, wouldn't it? The answer is yes. They were supposed to offer to the Lord the firstborn of everything. However, God does not condone child sacrifice. A statement I don't like. I don't think God approves of any human sacrifice, whether a child or adult or anything else. But, so God allowed, or actually had a regulation back in Leviticus, I think it's chapter 18, where the firstborn is dedicated to the Lord, but a firstborn child, you can have a substitute. An animal is substituted in their place. And God just kind of has this regular way of offering a substitute for human beings that deserve to be sacrificed and killed. The ultimate of that, of course, being his son Jesus. And you kind of see this pattern going through the Old Testament. And so he's going to say that here. Nevertheless, the firstborn of man you shall redeem. And the firstborn of unclean animals you shall redeem. Because you can't offer an unclean animal. So one of the regulations was if you had a donkey, which is unclean, you can't offer the firstborn donkey. And so you have two choices. You can offer an animal in its place, or you can break its neck. So if you're like, man, I got enough donkeys. A lot of jokes we could put there, but we'll let them go. I got enough donkeys in my family, so we're going to just kill this one. Or you might think, man, I need this donkey to help plow my fields or whatever it is that I'm going to do, but I got more goats than I need. I'm going to offer a goat in its place. So they kind of had that option that God gave them if it was an unclean animal. And the redemption price, at a month old you will redeem them. So you wait till a month old and offer the substitute. You shall fix it 5 shekels in silver. A shekel is a silver coin or a gold coin. According to the shekel of the sanctuary, which is 20 gerahs. And that's 20. And a shekel is about a day's wage. So it's about 1/5 of a day. So a couple hours, so to speak, of work to earn a gerah. But the firstborn of a cow, or the firstborn of a sheep, or the firstborn of a goat, which are all clean animals, you will not redeem. So if it's a clean animal, you have to offer the firstborn. They are holy. You shall sprinkle their blood on the altar and shall burn their fat as a food offering with a pleasing aroma to the Lord. But their flesh will be yours, as the breast that is waved and as the right thigh are yours. Okay, so now God gives some really bizarre regulations about some of these offerings and stuff. So one of them is when you bring a clean animal, you burn the fat first because God's going to eat that portion. And then you get to take the shoulder and the right calf and eat them. And so you'd wave them before the Lord. And so he says, man, you get to eat these. And the regulation for all of that kind of offerings in Leviticus chapter 7, if you want to go back and read it. So all the holy contributions that the people of Israel present to the Lord, I give to you, and to your sons and daughters with you as a perpetual due. It is a covenant of salt forever before the Lord, for you and for your offspring with you. So God says, this is how I'm going to pay you. This is how I'm going to provide for you, is you're going to take from what the people offer. And so these are very important verses, obviously, for pastors, because I get paid from what you give. So you should give a lot. But what in the world is it? A covenant of salt. Well, salt's a preservative. Salt lasts, so it's an idea of an eternal, long-lasting covenant. But I want to talk a little bit about, I don't know if I've talked about the word covenant before, and I do a thing on Thursdays called Theology Thursday, which is on our church's Facebook page and on our YouTube channel. You can access it through our website, fbc.net. And somewhere back there, I did one on covenant and talk about it and what it means, karath berith and all that stuff. But covenant it is a contract, but it's more than a contract. It is a personal contract that people make with one another. So, for example, we realized recently that we have not updated our will, and our will states that Josiah and Nathan will be raised by Alicia. Josiah and Nathan are now married, and Josiah's a dad, like we really don't need. But when we did our last will, they were still minors living at home. And so big sister would finish raising them if something was to happen to us. And so we realized we need to update our will. And so we've been talking about how we want to handle that and what we want to do. And so a will is a contract, but it's not just like a cold contract that we have with a bank for our mortgage. It's not like a contract you have when you go buy a car that will make payments sort of thing, or a lease on a house or whatever. There's something very personal about a will. It involves family. It involves, my mom, dad have 2 wills. They have their legal will, like sell everything and split it 4 ways. But they also have their keepsake will, like certain things go different places. And so Jerry and I are actually going to have 2 wills. And so all my kids are going to be together for the first time in quite some time at Christmas. And so I've already told them, look, plan on Christmas. We need to take a couple hours, and I want to go through the garage with some of my tools and who wants what. We'll kind of earmark those, and then I don't know me, so we're going to have to spend a while going through all of my guns and figuring out who gets which ones. And one of my kids is hilarious. All I want is a semi-automatic 12 gauge. And the 30-06, and her husband's like, and I want your We the People of 1911, and I want it's like, man, it'll be 4 or 5 apiece, but anyway, or more by the time I die. But but it's personal, and of course, because we live in the state of Arizona, we can legally, which everyone in the country should be able to do legally because it's guaranteed in the Second Amendment, purchase a gun from an individual without the government interfering and trying to record and track everything that I own. And so we'll have all of my guns that are not tracked by the state and who gets those, and then in the official will, we'll have both the guns I've bought from a dealer. And so we'll have all of that. It'll all be, and it's very personal because some of those guns are nothing. They're just guns. I want to have every kind of 12 gauge, so I own about 6 of those. And but some of them have meaning. The reason my daughter wants my Remington 1100 is because it was my granddad's. So it's not just, it's an heirloom. There's something personal about it. And covenant is not just you get this and you get that and you get something else. Oftentimes there's something very personal connected and attached with those items and those things. And so I don't know if any of them will ever want any of my Bibles. I don't know what they would do with them because half my notes are in Greek and Hebrew. And, so I just write, the Hebrew word here is this, or the phrase or whatever. But they might want something like that. If you've ever been in my office, I have my granddad's diploma from electrical school hanging on my office wall. And in less than a dozen years, I'll be 100 years old. And my granddad taught me how to wire a house. He was a licensed electrician, and so he taught me a lot about electricity. And so, those things are not just, hey, so-and-so gets this. There's something very personal about it. And so when you see covenant, it is a contract between God and the Levites here, but it's also personal. It's not just something cold on sign on the dotted line thing. And so he says this is going to be this covenant of salt, this permanent relationship forever before the Lord with you and your offspring with you. And the Lord said to Aaron, he says it again, you will have no inheritance in their land. And this is where we get to they're the 13th tribe. They're not going to get any actual land, like a block of land that's theirs. Neither shall you have any portion among them. I'm your portion and your inheritance among the people of Israel. So the Lord and serving him will be there. So here's the way that it works. The people all get their chunk of land and they can farm it, and then they bring their tithes to the tabernacle, and the priests, some of it they burn the whole thing, some of it they have to eat there, and then the rest of it they can take home to their families. So God provides for those 12 tribes by giving them land to farm. He provides for the tribe of Levi by allowing them to partake from the offerings that the people give of that land. And so God has it all set up to take care of all of them. But also the fact that we have all this about Levi reminds us how, the obvious, how great it is to serve the Lord. God says people serve the Lord and all that. But also how serious God is about his holiness. Billy Bob Israelite doesn't just run into the tabernacle. Only the priests are allowed. And even the priests have some very strenuous and strict regulations. And when you eat it, some of this you don't take home. God's very concerned that we recognize his holiness. And the two great dangers in our view of God are we make him our buddy, rather than the King of Kings and Lord of Lords, who is all holy and all sovereign and all righteous and sits on the throne of the universe and runs everything. And so we kind of make him just, the dude to run around with. On the other end, to exalt God as the King so high that God isn't with us anymore. He's up there, separated from us. Because the God who sits on the throne of heaven is also the God who said, lo, I'm with you always, even to the end of the age. Who says, this is where I meet with you, Moses. And so, the tabernacle and the sacrifices remind the people that God is accessible. But the fact that it's only the priest and there are stringent regulations reminds us that accessibility also involves a respect for his holiness and his righteousness, and we are to take it seriously and not flippantly that God allows us to have that kind of communion with him. So maintaining that balance is important in your life and mine as well. God's not my buddy, but he's also not disconnected from me. He is my king who also walks with me and indwells me and is with me all the time. And so maintaining that balance is delicate for us and was delicate for them. That's why God sets up all of these regulations like that. So, all right, well, we won't get to finish chapter tonight. Next week we get to talk about tithing. Everybody's like, man, I feel like I got something next Wednesday. Except it's actually about how do the Levites tithe?